Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. Kristy Hurt, you are known with the fashion community far and wide as not only being the fearless leader of the collab and amassing hundreds of people in the industry together to propel them forward, but also for your incredible recruiting work in the industry. So thank you for helping lots of people make millions of dollars. I'm excited to have you today on Getting Rich Together to talk a little bit more about you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yay, me too. So Kristy, let's start from the beginning. Let's start from Kristy as a young girl growing up in the suburbs, your parents sitting at the dinner table, watching the life go by. What was money like as a young child? What was your experience of it growing up?
Yeah, thinking back, I had everything I needed and we did not have an extravagant lifestyle at all, but I always got we would go shopping for back to school clothes every year. I always had 4 or 5 outfits planned for the beginning of the school year. We would go out to eat at my favorite Tex-Mex restaurant, at least probably once a week. So we had things like that seemed typical, but I didn't have a luxury car, but I did get a used car when I turned 16 and I drove myself to school. And growing up in Houston, my mom was a music teacher. My dad was a pilot. And I had a lot of wonderful benefits as the daughter of a pilot, which were flying standby. This is harder to do now, but when I was a kid, it was easier to book a flight as a standby writer. And often you would get not only on the plane, but into first class. Now they have all of these programs that upgrade frequent flyers. So if you're flying standby, often you're in the very back of the plane, or maybe you're in the jump seat. But I flew first class a lot when I was a kid because my dad was a pilot. It was actually so cool. And some of my most incredible experiences from when I was a child had to do with my dad being a pilot. So because we flew for free, if he had a random trip to New York City on a Wednesday, he would sometimes call me and say, I want to pick you up early from school. Do you want to come to New York with me tonight? We'll see a Broadway show. We'll stay in Midtown, and then we'll fly back early tomorrow morning, and you can just go into school late tomorrow. And I would do it. So I remember doing things like that when I was in middle school. And that to me seemed really cool. Or we would go on trips to hiking in Arizona, things like that. Skiing in Utah, Colorado. So there were a lot of benefits to having those travel privileges. And I also did a study abroad program in Spain when I was in college. And I remember flying first class from Houston to Madrid. And it was so luxurious. The beds that lie completely flat. And this was when I was maybe 19 years old. And I was sitting next to a movie producer from LA. And it was just, I felt like I had made it. I felt like, oh, this is my life now. I certainly had not. But it was some of those early experiences that actually really made my growing up as the daughter of a pilot quite fun.
Wow, that is so amazing. So Kristy, take us to college and what it was like for you. Now, obviously having these incredible experiences, flying to New York, meeting people in first class, definitely not something that a lot of young people get to see and experience, right? Life beyond that which we know. What was life like for you in college when you first left home? What were some of the stories that you saw? Did you work in college? What was it like?
Yeah, I had decided to pursue pre-med and I went to University of Texas in Austin, and I got a job working in a retail store, and I was living on campus and I wanted a part-time job. And I was also taking a full load of classes. And I started working in this great boutique called By George, which sold at the time contemporary brands mostly, although now they sell designer and contemporary brands. They've changed hands, but they're still very much alive. And that was my first experience in fashion. So I was studying calculus, organic chemistry, sociology, and things like that. And then going immediately after classes to By George, where I would work on the sales floor. And that was really my first introduction to retail, wholesale, brands, selling. And the owner of By George was very hands-on in terms of buying the collections for the store. So it was a multi-brand specialty boutique. And there were 3 locations in Austin. So I did work while going to school. And it's funny that I ended up working in retail because it was completely different than what I was studying. And that may have been the first sign that I wasn't actually that interested in medicine. I thought I wanted to become an orthodontist because it seemed like a great lifestyle. I loved my orthodontist. I could see myself having my own private practice, which I think makes sense when you think about what I'm doing today. But I really did enjoy working in retail. And I also worked in restaurants, which I enjoyed, but not quite as much. I think I preferred the fashion and the perks of working for a boutique and getting access to product and things like that a little bit more than going home smelling like food at 2 a.m. But I got all the way through college. And luckily at the time, college, because I was an in-state student and also college was a lot less expensive back then, I graduated with very little debt. And I also had plenty of spending money from my part-time job. And also Austin used to be really inexpensive to live in. It's a lot more expensive now, but it was a great place to live and go to college. And I spent 4 years there, including a study abroad program, which I did in Spain. And that was also not a super expensive thing that I did, but it was something that was really important to me. I really wanted to live in another country and work on my Spanish. And I remember actually when I was living in Spain, dreaming in Spanish. And that was really cool because I'd been studying Spanish since 7th grade. I started kind of late. But by the time I got to Spain and I had been living there all summer and taking classes in Spanish and speaking it all day, every day with the family I was living with and in school, I finally started to dream in Spanish. And I wish I had kept it up. I think about taking Spanish classes now because even though there are plenty of people in New York that speak Spanish, I haven't really kept it up. And I think that would be something really fun to do. Maybe when I'm older, I'll go live in a Spanish-speaking country again so I can perfect it.
That is so incredible, Kristy. So thinking about like actually having some money that you are saving or being able to spend money when you're in college, that's a really interesting space to be in, right? It doesn't necessarily happen to everyone in college. At that time, was the idea of savings around? How did you kind of think about what to do with your money? And then obviously those first steps getting into a job after college, because obviously salaries changed. You clearly had your heart in the right direction as far as knowing you were going to go into retail. But what did it start to look like from a savings standpoint and those early career moves that you made?
I remember being in college and wanting to go out to dinner and wanting to go out with my friends. And even though, yes, I did have spending money, I did actually take out a credit card, which I did use. And I did, when I finally graduated and got a job, had to dedicate a lot of my income, almost all of it, to paying down that credit card. And in hindsight, I think that was maybe a good lesson that credit card debt is really hard to pay off. So I don't remember that becoming a massive problem, but I do remember having to pay that back when I was in my 20s. I wasn't thinking that much about saving or investing at that young age. I think I just wanted extra money and I didn't have wealthy parents who were giving me money and I wanted to be able to go out and have fun and do things. So I just wanted to work. So I worked pretty much from the age of 15. I had been a lifeguard. I had even worked in high school at a restaurant. And so I worked these jobs in college as well. And when I graduated from University of Texas, I didn't see a lot of career opportunities in Austin at the time. And so I really wanted to move to a big city. And I decided not to apply to med school. So instead, I drove to New York.
Wow. You drove to New York.
I drove to New York, yes. And I drove with one girlfriend who graduated at the same time and agreed to go. And she knew one person who lived in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. And I remember we drove to New York together, and we actually drove a U-Haul with all of our stuff from our apartments because we didn't live together. So we had all of our stuff from 2 different apartments. She sold her car, and then we were towing my car on the back of the U-Haul, and we drove all the way from Austin to New York City like that.
Oh my God. That is amazing. So obviously, like, heading over to New York City, that was a big, probably shock in so many different ways. What were your first impressions of this new life you were building?
Well, I think I was just very bold, and nothing scared me at the time. My dad was excited about it, and my mom was terrified. And I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. And mind you, I graduated college in 1998. So there was no internet really at that time. I mean, people weren't really I think the internet was just starting to become a thing, which sounds crazy because it doesn't even seem like that long ago. But I remember us getting emails my senior year in college, and maybe 1 or 2 professors made us check email to get assignments. And I remember everyone, or maybe me only, being super annoyed by that because the technology was very intimidating. But when I first moved to New York, there were no job boards online. There was no access to information on the internet, so on. So I didn't have any connections in New York. And I had that retail experience. And so I remember getting to New York, and we slept on the couch of these friends of my friend, and they hooked us up with some broker who found us an apartment. We rented an apartment, and I picked up a copy of Women's Wear Daily. And in the back of Women's Wear Daily, there were a couple of jobs posted. And one of them, I applied to every job that was listed. And one company called me back. It was Kate Spade. And I remember they called me literally within an hour of me faxing my resume over to the number.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
the job was assistant manager in the flagship store. Now, I don't know that they're getting a lot of college graduates from University of Texas in Austin with retail experience applying for that job. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. Probably not. So they were excited to have a qualified candidate apply. And it was November of 98. And so it was a very busy time for that brand. And it was the hottest thing around at the time. And so they hired me almost immediately. And I was just thrilled to have a job, even though the pay was really terrible. But in my mind, I was winning because I had got an apartment. I moved to New York, I got an apartment, I got a job. I mean, I had a job within a week of getting to New York. And luckily, this was during a period of high growth for Kate Spade. And so I learned so much during the 5 years I spent there. So I was there from 1998 to 2003. And during this time period, Neiman Marcus bought about half the company, and the 4 original partners retained about half. And with that investment, they started to open a bunch of new stores. And I was very fortunate that I got to travel and open stores for them in Boston, Manhasset, Chicago, Greenwich, San Francisco, and help recruit teams for the new stores, merchandise the new stores, help the new managers. We had a store in LA. I think it was New York and LA when I started. And then we opened all of those other stores. And it was like a family. It was really, really fun being part of that brand in those days. And we had some very typical type benefits and programs at the company, such as a profit sharing plan and things like that, which I did participate in. And of course, I was too junior to have any kind of equity in the company or anything like that. But it was really nice to see the experiences of the founders who create this company from scratch only 5 years earlier. I think they launched in 1993, and by 2000, they sold half the company for, I think, almost $40 million. So that was a pretty big deal for them. And they were still really young. I think they were probably in their early 30s or something like that. So
That's
getting
amazing
to see that happen right before my eyes and seeing these passionate young people who created this brand out of nothing and the success that they saw in those early days was really incredible. And the brand has since changed hands, eventually was sold to Liz Claiborne, which later was sold to Tapestry and so on. And then the original partners eventually left. But during those early years, I would say I was mostly working my butt off to get promoted to make more money. And I was very lucky that they did promote me quite a lot to be manager and then regional manager. And they did raise me quite a bit. So I got to the point where I was making enough money where I could afford my lifestyle comfortably. I had my own apartment without a roommate. And
how old were you when you were able to have your own apartment without a roommate?
I was pretty young. I was probably 24.
Wow, Chris, that's a huge thing to be in New York City and not have a roommate at 24. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I also never once got $1 from my parents or anyone. I never had that option. I mean, I think if I were desperate, my mom or my grandparents might have given me money, but I never had to ask for it. And I didn't think it would really be an option either. So I just made it work. I just worked a lot and worked my way up and got to the point where I was living very comfortably. Now, I mean, I lived in a rent stabilized tiny studio apartment that cost $1,200 a month, but I was living in Nolita and walking to work in Soho and having a
loving
blast.
life.
Yeah, no complaints. No complaints.
And so at that point, had you invested then in like a 401, like were you hip at 24 to investing in a 401k at that point? Had you already started doing these things?
Yeah, I can't remember. I know that Kate Spade had some sort of profit sharing or something that I did participate in because I remember having quite a lot of money when I quit there after 5 years that rolled over into an IRA. So I definitely had invested some money. But there were a couple of things that happened towards the end of my time at Kate Spade, which was around 2003, which was that I met someone, we started dating. We dated for probably a year or two, maybe two. And then we decided at that point we wanted to move in together. I was only 25. And there were a few different things that happened at once. So first of all, I hadn't even thought of buying an apartment, but we ended up buying an apartment. And that hadn't even really been on my radar. But I scraped together enough money to put down half of the down payment for this starter apartment because that's what we agreed collectively would be a smart idea. And so I'm really grateful that that happened. I was also going to business school. So I decided to pursue an MBA and I was working full time while pursuing the MBA and then also bought this apartment. So all of these things kind of happened in tandem. And I'm still waiting for the MBA to pay off in a way. I chose a program that was very good for working professionals and actually wasn't that expensive. So it didn't actually cost me that much, but it was a very big time investment. But my thinking was that during this time period where there wasn't a lot of hiring going on, this was right after 9/11, the first couple of years after 9/11, better to take the time to invest in my education and get an advanced degree while I'm still young and before having kids and so on. So I did that. And I think that that was definitely a smart decision, which I think ultimately long-term, for example, if I ever went back to a brand in-house or a role where an MBA would be preferred, I have that. And so I'm glad I did that when I was young. The other really great thing about buying the apartment was that we bought in Park Slope, which is in Brooklyn, which is a pretty desirable neighborhood that was also very much going up in value at the time. And so the apartment that we bought for $340,000 in 2004, we were able to sell in 2006 for $550,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive.
And so that was a really amazing way to make a couple $100,000 in 2 years. And I think that was, and I sold that apartment without a broker. So we sold that by owner and I remember negotiating with the buyer and it definitely gave me kind of a high. And I thought, I want to do this again. So I have now, I think I'm on my 5th property in New York. So I have since bought and sold numerous properties and probably made more money from real estate than anything else. I mean, maybe not over the years, but like the real estate when you get it right, it can be really good. And in both of the ones that I made the most money, the biggest profit on the flip, I didn't stay there for very long. They were like 2 years before I sold them.
That's incredible. And so, so once you kind of unlocked this real estate magic, how did that inform how you thought about investing and wealth creation moving forward? Now you have this really clear indicator of this is a big win. Did that change sort of how you thought about things like investing in the stock market or investing in other vehicles? Did real estate become the primary focus, or how did that contribute to other parts of the pie?
Well, I think it's important to point out that I did not have money from family for a down payment. And my very first apartment, I think we really only put down $70,000 or something, which was really scraped together. And I know even that is hard to save for young people, but you know, we didn't have kids. We didn't have any other priorities other than not eating out. And so I think saving is really important. And I've been so inspired by friends of mine who have sacrificed trips and luxury hotels and going out to restaurants in order to meet certain financial goals, like paying off their student loan debt and things like that. I don't think that seems fun at the time, but I do think it is something that is really important to do. And it allows you so much freedom once you get through it. Let's see. I would say that having the success I did have with real estate was fantastic, but I only had so much borrowing power. And I wouldn't say that I took it to such an extreme that I wanted to become a real estate developer or anything like that. So I was mostly buying properties to live in, but what I would often do, and I have done now, I think 3 times, is buy multifamily properties in Brooklyn where I can have a rental unit. And so I have income, which helps cover the cost of the mortgage. And this is very common here and probably in San Francisco as well. And so that has always been a very positive experience for me. In terms of investing in other vehicles, once I started to make enough money that I had any extra money, I did start to put away as much as possible into 401k. I would always max out a 401k. I can't stress how important that is to at least take advantage of whatever your company provides. And if they have a match or something like that's amazing. At some point, I did actually find a wealth manager who would invest.
At what point?
Person that I work with has a minimum that you have to invest in order to work with him. And I think it was probably when I had a chunk of money, probably from a real estate sale. So I think it was probably like around $300,000 or $400,000, something like that, where I was able to put that money with this one person and have him invest it to watch it grow. And this was money that I knew I would never touch. And so that has been kind of, I would say, not a safety net, because I wouldn't ever want to liquidate that money, but it helps you sleep at night when you know that you have money put away that is growing, that you're investing over time, that is going to be there for you one day when you really need it. And hopefully it's when you retire long into the future. And hopefully it grows far beyond what it is even today. You know what I mean? But like, I just think that like starting early is so important. The other thing is I ended up having 3 children, 529 plans, starting those as soon as they're born is so important to start saving and investing that money for them when they go to college. I did open up a Gemini account and put some money in crypto. That's been kind of dodgy. It's been a little up and down, but you know, I think it's really fun to test things out. When new things come out, I think it's really fun to test them and try them. And even my kids have Greenlight credit cards, and Greenlight credit cards are credit cards you can use anywhere, but your parents have to put the money on the credit card, and then you can only use the money that's on the card. You can't overspend. And they have an investing tool in Greenlight where you can actually buy stock. So my 13-year-old son has been buying stock. Like he'll ask for, I want a share of NVIDIA or whatever, Microsoft, like he knows all these video game and tech companies, AI companies. So he will ask for stock sometimes as a birthday present or something like that.
That's amazing. So like having your children, and I imagine by that point you had done some of these real estate deals, and where were you in your life journey when you decided to have children, and how has that changed, I guess, your philosophy around money? How did money change with the introduction of kids?
Oh, goodness. I think that kids are really expensive. They're more expensive than you think they will be, or maybe I was just a little bit naive. I live in a great neighborhood in Brooklyn where the public schools are fantastic. And I just assumed that 3 kids would be no more expensive than 2. And I had twins the first go round. And so my twins were actually born really prematurely. And I thought, I need one more chance at this, having 1 kid, maybe a full-term kid, have a different experience the second time around. And I was very lucky that I did have a great experience with my second pregnancy. After that, I was so done. But, having kids in New York City and really anywhere really does change your financial picture quite a lot. And in those early days, we were pretty scrappy, and I had left the corporate world, started my own company, and was working from home, default parent. I had a nanny. The expenses between nanny, private preschool, and any other classes, camps, things they do, all the extra food, toys, gear, all that stuff, it certainly really does add up. I think, honestly, what I've always tried to do is just limit my expenses as much as possible and not live beyond my means. I think that is so important. And in hindsight, like maybe we could have even had more help when they were little because it was really hard. It was really exhausting. But I think making certain sacrifices, we don't live in an enormous space. We've always lived in fairly smaller size apartments or houses. And now I'm very lucky that my kids each have their own rooms, but like my younger son has a tiny room and it's fine. It's just the way you live in New York City or any major city. So I would say being okay with sacrificing on space. If you can go make public school work, it's amazing. We did for a very long time. I don't know. I think that it's definitely had its challenges for sure. Mm-hmm. But we've been very lucky that we positioned ourselves in such a way that we had lower expenses around the time we had kids.
I think it's prudent. And it sounds like you guys came up with like a collective strategy that would really work for you guys. So some good partnership on figuring out what was important. So moving through having this incredible corporate career and then moving on to launching your own business and then certainly launching the collab, I'd love to get an understanding of how you thought about money and what money really meant to you as you moved from working corporate and working for someone else through being able to see yourself through to everyone starts to be an entrepreneur because of a desire for some independence, financial independence, time independence. What were some of the things that caused you to sort of make that jump? And then what was money like? How did you think about money as you went through these other sorts of transitions?
I spent 5 years running stores for Kate Spade, and then I was very lucky that I got a job at LVMH Group where I was working in corporate human resources for LVMH Inc., which is the holding company, and then the fashion division, and then eventually Louis Vuitton North America. And I rotated through all of these different HR functions from learning and development, recruitment and development, generalist, employee relations. I really learned a lot during my years there. And at the time, I was working 5 days a week in the office, and I would arrive at somewhere 8:30 a.m. and I would commute on the subway from Brooklyn to Midtown. It took me about 45 minutes to get there in the morning. So I would often leave my house by 7:45 a.m. at the latest. I had a nanny who came at 7:15 a.m. And I still remember that it was looked down upon to leave at 6. So I would have to stay until 6:30, 6:45. And this is even with newborn infant twins at home after I came back from maternity leave. And so I would get home, if I left at 6:45, I would often not get home until 7:45. Sometimes the subways weren't running as fast in the evenings. And the twin babies were already in bed. And I just really struggled with this idea that I would not see my kids Monday through Friday. That was just really hard for me to wrap my head around. And I think that if I had been making a ton of money, I might have just said, well, this is a sacrifice I have to make for our family and there's no option. But at the time I thought, I don't think I'm getting paid enough to do this. And I'd always wanted to do something on my own. And like I said, we were in a position where our expenses were really low. We had a tenant paying a large portion of our mortgage downstairs. We were living in the upper duplex. And I was able at the time to leave and start my own company. And it was the best decision for me at the time. I ended up finding an amazing nanny who was part-time, who would tag team with me. And I essentially worked, I don't know, probably 20, 30 hours a week or something like that in the beginning. And I was also very lucky that I met my first client who also had twins the same age as me. And she was the creative director of a fashion brand. And I started to consult for her. And then before I knew it, I had a second client. And then I started to get calls about doing searches. It really happened organically and very seamlessly. And so I created a website and some other materials to go along with my business to support the services that I was providing. But I was acting as an HR consultant and search consultant. So recruiting for brands, outsource, retain search for brands. And it worked very well. And I think the fact that I had worked for Kate Spade and LVMH brands, which is more than 50 brands across beauty, wines and spirits, fashion, most fashion companies were willing to hire me because I had the experience of both designer and contemporary. And that was really important to most of my clients, that I understood luxury, that I understood what they were looking for. So it was very easy in the beginning to find enough work. And I think the fact that my expenses were really low at the time was helpful because I didn't feel a lot of pressure. And it was just very nice. I felt like I had a really lovely work-life balance. I had a little bit of support with the kids, but I didn't have to go to work and never see them. I didn't have to travel. I remember going on a trip, a business trip. There were two when I first went back. And I just couldn't imagine when they were so little, just being gone all the time and leaving them with my partner or a nanny, or like I didn't have family nearby. And so I just didn't really see it being an option. My business has gone on very successfully for many, many years until the pandemic. And the pandemic really changed things for our industry. First of all, things came to a screeching halt. I had an amazing year in 2019. I think 2019 was my best year ever for search. And I was on fire. I thought, I'm going to have to hire more people to help me. This is great. I'm finally making big money. And then March 15th of 2020, everyone called and said, we can't pay you and we're putting this on hold and we don't know what's happening. And that was that. Luckily, it was only a couple of months, but it was a perfect couple of months because a friend of mine, Eliza Licht, called me and she said, I think you should start a community. And I said, what is that? I didn't even know what she was talking about. I mean, I obviously know what the word community means, but I didn't understand what it meant to start a community. And now there are a bunch of different kinds of monetized communities that we see in the world, but I didn't really understand what that meant. And so I said, describe to me what you're talking about and what this would look like. And she said, oh, it's not going to be hard. You can just start a Google group and just add people to it and just think of it as like a virtual living room for people to hang out and you can meet up on Zoom and stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll try this. So I announced on Instagram that I was going to start this. I didn't even call it a community. I just said, let's get together on Zoom and talk. And if you want to be added to this group, let me know. And I said, when you get added to the group, introduce yourself. So I thought maybe there would be 10 or 15 people joining. And there were, I'm not kidding you, 2,000 people joined.
I was one of them.
Yes. In the very beginning, right? You probably remember the announcement. And these were mostly people who followed my Instagram. And I had at this point I was very late to Instagram, and I really wish I had started it in the beginning when Instagram first came out. I was very late to this. I think I started posting on Instagram in 2017, and that was actually very late. And so I had amassed over 6,000 or so followers, but they weren't just like random followers. They're like all people like you who work in the industry, who are seasoned professionals. And so about a third of those people, I think, joined. And I didn't realize when I started the Instagram that I was building this community from scratch and what that could ultimately mean in the collab. But luckily for me, a lot of people were sitting at home twiddling their thumbs without much to do. And they all saw the introductions coming through in the Google group, which, by the way, no offense to Eliza, was a disaster because everybody's emails were just, everyone's inbox was just completely clogged with all of the inbound emails of people introducing themselves. But there were a bunch of people who saw those emails and thought, wow, Kristy has access to all of this incredible talent. This clearly has so much potential, and we don't have anything else to do right now. So we want to be a part of this. We want to help her build it. And so very quickly, me and a bunch of other people who were complete strangers who volunteered to help build the collab and name it and create a website and create a whole schedule of events and a podcast and all the other things that we do to support our members was born. And by September of 2020, we converted to a subscription model. We converted about 30% of our members right off the bat. And we are now celebrating year 4 of the collab.
That's incredible. What an amazing way to rebound from a potential firestorm of what's happening with my business. How, on a personal level, as you were looking at your own income planning and how to float yourself during this time period, obviously coming off the heels of sounds like a record year, and then looking at how to emotionally measure out now this uncertainty, how did you have to rethink about spending or money or plans that you had? How did that change any of your existing plans at that time?
Yeah. Well, luckily the kids were home. They were all in public school. No one was traveling. No one was even leaving the house. So I wasn't spending a lot of money. There were some clients that ended up resuming their searches by summertime. And that was a relief because I don't know if you remember, but at first everyone thought that the pandemic was going to basically end the world as we know it. And then suddenly there was this burst of injection of money coming from, I don't even quite understand it, to be honest. But even though everyone was working from home, suddenly it seemed like the economy had this big boost. And there were so many jobs and there was so much happening and there was all this activity. So things were kind of up and down. And I will say that period of uncertainty has really continued. And I think it's been exacerbated by a lot of the world events that we've experienced, obviously. So is the pandemic, and then Black Lives Matter. And then I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch, but climate change getting more serious, war with Ukraine, then the war going on now in the Middle East. I mean, there's been so much tragedy and the looming recession that has been on everyone's minds for the last couple of years. And so I do think companies are rethinking the way that they spend money. I see that a lot of my clients are using internal resources to recruit. I still do recruit for some brands that don't have in-house HR or key searches that they need to outsource for whatever reason, or emergencies when someone resigns for some reason they have to replace them. So I think building those relationships in the industry long-term has really paid off. But at the same time, what I have continued to do is continue my consulting practice as well, where I act as fractional HR director or HR consultant and will occasionally do short-term contract roles, long-term contract roles to keep myself active. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility of going in-house for a really exciting opportunity as well. So I think it's important to keep a really open mind. And I think that the great thing about the collab is that it creates an opportunity for me to have passive income, which also can result in coaching clients. So a lot of people join the collab when they're in a period of a pivot, or they're struggling to maybe get enough interviews or get the job once they have the interviews, or they're between things, or they're thinking of launching their own thing. So a lot of people join us when they're in some transitional period. And I also started to rev up my coaching practice in the very beginning of the pandemic. So I've been also doing that for many years. And so I would say that between the coaching, the collab, and then in terms of my HR consulting work, just considering all options, I think that that's really helped me to achieve bridging any gaps that there have been since the pandemic changed the way some of these clients spend money.
That's really wonderful. It seems like you've done a great job of diversifying where your income streams are coming from and not being overly reliant on like one specific revenue stream. As you think about what money means to you emotionally, how do you think about how you spend your money today? What sort of values, or how do you think about it? And to that point, what does it mean for you? How does it feel to know that you're great at flipping properties and you can continue to do that, or that you have resources in a brokerage account that's being managed? What does the money mean and feel to you?
I think that because I live in New York City, where there are so many people that have so much money and so many people that have no money, I try to keep perspective that I'm in a really good place, even though there are people around me who have so much more. And I want to continue to make really smart decisions. And I think some of the big decisions that I have ahead of me right now are college. And do we splurge on private universities for the kids if they really want to go somewhere that costs $80,000 a year, or maybe they get some merit? Or do we say, go to a SUNY Binghamton or SUNY New Paltz or whatever, which is so much more affordable. I think a lot of people are questioning what the worth of a college degree is these days. I mean, as a recruiter, I still really hope that all of my kids get a college degree, unless they're so passionate about something else where they're able to make money right away. But I am a little traditional in that I do believe that having a college degree minimum is important to just open up doors. I know it doesn't guarantee anything, and a bachelor's degree in poetry or whatever is certainly not going to get somebody a job. But I think I'm hoping we can find places that my kids really want to be, whether it's in a city or in the country, that isn't crazy expensive, where they fit in and they can find their people and have an enjoyable college experience where they get to spend that time learning and having fun with friends and growing up a little. And hopefully, like I did, also working during that time and figuring out what they really want to do. But I will say it is a period right now of higher stress, I think, because of the college. It's daunting. It seemed very far away. And yes, we do have the 529s and we have some money put away for college, but the cost of college has just gotten extreme. And so it does feel a bit daunting, but we've had a lot of serious conversations about options, and we will definitely apply to a range of schools, some more affordable, and then we'll see what happens. I think this year, for the first time, my older kids who are 16 will hopefully work this summer. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in them once they're making their own money, and also see how they respond to working and making their own money and saving and investing. And I will definitely be working together on investing in smart ways and putting money away and stuff like that.
I love that. The interesting thing about thinking about legacy and even what you want to leave for your children, whether that's financial resources or even ways of thinking or how to approach managing things in their lives. What are some of the things that you hope to impart on them when it comes to finances and money?
Oh my gosh. Well, I hope a lot of these decisions that we've made will rub off on them. I think that we've made some decisions. So the last property that we bought is actually a 3-family property. And this was my idea, which I'm pretty proud of, because I thought, how great would it be if our kids decide they want to stay in New York City, that we could give, ultimately, if we could afford to keep this building, that we could basically rent it to the kids, meaning they each get their own apartment and they pay rent to us, but we own the building. And I actually think that was a pretty smart move, because I see how much rent costs. And I think it's really hard for kids who grow up in New York City, San Francisco, especially if they've grown up living in their family home and then they get their first job and they're making whatever they're making, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, maybe more if they're working in tech or banking or something, they're making way more than that. But if we're talking retail, they might be making 40. I don't know. Some bigger corporate brands are paying more like 60, 70 for starting salaries. It really depends on the job. But rents are astronomical. So the idea that we could subsidize the rent for them would be huge. And I didn't have that, but it's a gift that I would be thrilled to give my kids. And I think it would also be really good for them starting out. And I can't imagine, I mean, it's possible they're going to decide to move to Paris or LA or wherever, but I kind of doubt it. I mean, I think kids that grow up in New York City pretty much always come back to New York City.
Yes, they do. You did a really smart thing, Kristy.
Yeah. So I have a feeling they won't be as eager to get away as I was.
I love that. And so looking at the body of work that you're creating and thinking about life in your 90s, and maybe you're sitting in your country home and you're remarking on an incredible life that you've built. What's the body of work look like for you? What does the impact of looking at your life have for you, for your loved ones, and people around you?
Wow. Well, I feel like I have so much more to do in the next 20 years. That is for sure. I feel like I am embarking on the next 2 decades, which need to be my highest earning income years. And the reason why I say that is because I'm in my 40s, first of all, and women in my family live forever. So my grandmother is 103. My other grandmother died when she was 100. And I am going to need to make enough money in the next 25 years or 30 years to last me until I'm 110, probably. I mean, people are living so much longer. I mean, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll die when I'm like 90, but I don't need to live to be 110. I mean, I don't, but it does stress me out. It's so funny. I mean, I'm so grateful that I have my grandmother. She's amazing. She's incredible. But the idea that I have to make enough money to get me that far in life is actually really daunting. So I am not planning on retiring anytime soon. Luckily, I love to work and I'm always thinking of new business ideas. So I don't know that I'm ready to think quite about my legacy, but I will say that I love helping people. I think I'm happiest and I feel most useful when I'm helping people. And a lot of the businesses that I've set up, like the collab, is very inclusive and accessible in terms of price. My coaching is very affordable compared to what other coaches charge. And I do that for a reason, because I need to be paid for my work, but I also want to offer these things to people who I know are in need at a time when they come to me and they need help. And yes, it's important to invest in yourself, but I also understand what most of these people can afford. And so it's been really important to me to make the pricing accessible. And then when I'm working with companies doing retained search, luckily there's a very standard way that works. And it's very consistent across the board in this industry. So it's much easier to make money from corporations than it is from individuals. So
yep.
For anyone who wants to make a lot of money as a consultant, work with companies, don't work with individuals. It's very, very hard to charge individuals a lot of money, in my opinion, and in my experience. And so I'm really happy about the way that I've chosen to do that. And I am working on diversifying some of my offerings as well. And there's so many things, especially since starting the collab, that I have built in terms of new skills. So the community aspect is so key to what I do in all aspects of my life. And I think that community in general is something that people are starting to respect so much more, especially in brands. I think customers are realizing how expensive digital marketing is, or brands are realizing how expensive, brands and CEOs are realizing how expensive digital marketing is. And so building community for a brand is so important, right? And that storytelling aspect and getting customers to buy in, getting them excited about your brand and all of that. So I think some of the skills I built around community could translate into a lot of different areas. So I'm excited to see what might unfold in the next decade or two.
But Swiss Army knife built, right?
Exactly. And so I'm excited about seeing opportunities that might come. I'm excited about my kids getting older. I had them when I was relatively young. I mean, not for biology's sake, but for New York standards, I think I had them relatively young. And so I'm excited about embarking on the next phase of my career now that they're all teenagers. And it just gives me a lot more freedom to travel, to work cookie hours, to do late night events and all kinds of things that when your kids are really little is very difficult to do. If you're a super hands-on parent, which I always have been. So much cooking. I mean, I still do so much cooking. I have to say, I love cooking. That's something that not everyone knows about me. I love cooking. I love food. And I cook constantly all the time. I'm constantly cooking and cleaning and working at the same time. Funny. Yeah. So a lot of cooking and a lot of working, but more freedom. I'm excited about more freedom as the kids get a bit older.
That's amazing. So to wrap out our conversation, I've got two questions to ask you. The first is, obviously a great part of making money is the decision of what to do with it and how to spend it. And so I'd love to hear, what are the things that you love to spend your money on? What are the most meaningful things that you like to participate in or pay for?
I think it's really great if you can afford to own your primary home. If you can also have rental income like I do, it's fantastic. It makes it more affordable and it frees up money for you to buy a second home. So I also have a house in Long Island, in Bellport, which is a adorable little sailing town. And it is so fun to get away there on the weekends, especially in the summer. A lot of our friends have boats. We spend so much time on the beach there. And it's such a social, fun place to be. I live right in between a couple of organic farms. And I think one of the things about living in New York City and probably San Francisco as well is like, if you live in the city proper, you often feel like you just need to get out. And it's so nice to have that feeling of escaping from the city and going away. And the other great thing is that we haven't done this yet, but I do plan at some point to rent out that house as well. So if there's a time where maybe my daughter wants to spend the summer in Europe, we could potentially rent out the house in Bellport and go spend a month in Europe or something like that. And that would cover the cost of our month in Europe. So having a second home, and even you could rent out your New York City home. Like, I think that there are a bunch of Airbnb regulations and so on in some of these places, but I think renting out your home is a really great way to make additional income. It's not something I've really exploited because of my kids and stuff. And it's just like your home has to be so like organized and clean. You have to be able to put all your stuff in one closet and stuff like that. It's been really hard to do that with kids. But I do think eventually we could do that with the Bellport house. And I think that could be a great way to earn some additional income. So I think owning homes, critical. I do really appreciate myself. Like, what do I spend money on other than fitness and food? I love experiences. So I've been on some of the most incredible trips. I've been so fortunate to travel to Morocco and Hong Kong and Vietnam. And of course, France and Italy and Spain. And I feel really fortunate that I've been able to travel to some of these places. Istanbul is high on my list. Haven't been there yet. I'd love to explore a little bit more of Southeast Asia. There's certainly countries in Europe that I haven't even been to that I really want to explore. I would love to one day live in Europe. But I think for me, most of what I really spend money on lately is food and experiences.
I love
and
that.
Fitness. I'm very into, I mix up every single day. I do something different. So it's either CrossFit, Pilates, yoga, or dance. So every day I choose something different. And that is really, really important to me and something that I prioritize over pretty much almost everything else.
I love that.
So that is definitely something that I think is worth investing in. And I'm lucky that the places I go are not crazy expensive either. So
that's
and
amazing.
that's pretty much it. And then kids, that thing that I spend too much money on that I'm not proud of is DoorDash. We DoorDash so much food. And it's not for me, it's for my kids. My kids are picky eaters. And even though I cook for them constantly, they always want DoorDash. And I should invest in DoorDash.
My final question, Kristy, is what can we do for you? What do you need right now? What are the things that you're calling in and how can we support you?
Thank you for asking. I'm always looking for new business. Join the collab, refer the collab to people, but hire me for a one-on-one. But most importantly, hire me for a really big job or hire me to recruit talent for your teams or hire me to build a community for your company. I would say those are probably the things that I most need. I'd love to one day be on the board of a company or companies. I think that's something in the future that I would absolutely love to do. I do a lot of speaking opportunities as well at the CFDA, at NYU, Parsons, Columbia Business School. I speak a lot to the luxury and retail clubs of MBA students and undergrad students. So I'm always happy to do speaking opportunities, especially if they're remote and very easy to do. But even if I have to travel somewhere, sometimes I'm able to do that as well. So speaking opportunities, board opportunities, jobs, clients, collab members, all of it. Bring it all.
Kristy, you're a gem. Thank you for sharing behind the scenes as to how the sausage has been made. It's a wonderful story and very inspirational. And I think the life you're leading is pretty remarkable. And those of us who get to play in it with you are very lucky. So thank you for spending some beautiful time today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. And if anybody wants to reach out, you can find me on Instagram, probably Kate Hurt Consulting, or join the collab. That's probably the easiest. Or you just Google me, Kristy Hurt, and you'll find my number. I'm pretty easy to find. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Kristy.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.